begins.
But I guess that these are his new games that he got? They're not that good graphics, but they look cool. I don't really like this one. Let me try this one. Space Invaders. This isn't good either.
Hey bud, found my games?
They stink!
What?
They stink!
Hey Cole, how about you give these a try?
But me and Blue are playing Knights in Armor.
Have a look at that. So what do you think about these?
They're better. They're great, actually. They're actually pretty good.
Hi everybody. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Glen's Retro Show. Now this is something that I've had in the works for a long time. A lot of people have been asking me how I made mine and they want to do it themselves. And I promised I would do a video on just that. So today's the day. I know it's been a long time coming, but we are going to figure out how to turn these basic fun little handhelds. You can see here, there's little static fixed screens. We're going to figure out how we're going to change this into my Glen Retro Show Mini-Cades, where we convert the basic fun units into basically little Raspberry Pi computers running emulation station. Now this will be a multi-part video, There'll probably be 3 or 4 episodes total. So make sure you like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss any videos. And we'll get started on part 1, which today we're going to be talking about how to get some parts, how to dismantle the Basic Fun units, and how to get displays inside. Let's get started.
Yes, subscribe! Subscribe, do it!
Let's go. And before we begin, I would just like to say that if this particular series helps you in building your own Basic Fun Mini-Cade, or if it just helps you in general with building some other project, all I ask in return is you point people to my YouTube channel to say where you learned this information. I just want to help grow my channel, and I need your help to do so. So if this series helps you in any way, shape, or form, please not only like, share, and subscribe, but do tell some friends about my channel and have them subscribe as well. I really appreciate it. And now let's get to it. Okay, everybody, so if you want to build one of these mini-cades that I've done with the Basic Fun Space Invaders or the Basic Fun Pac-Man, there's a couple things you're going to need. Now, basically, you're going to use a Raspberry Pi Zero, at least that's what I used. You may find something else you want to try and fit in there, but trust me, space is going to be at a premium on this build. So, here I just got a basic kit. I mean, I bought this actually a long time before I started the Raspberry Pi builds and the Basic Fun. So I got this little kit here. It wasn't expensive. I think it was like $22. Include a Raspberry Pi 1.3. Now this was well before they released the W, and I would probably recommend getting the Raspberry Pi Zero W if you can at this point. Having Bluetooth and Wi-Fi built right in will definitely save you some headaches down the road. Got an SD card here. Got a case where I'm not going to end up using that at all. Power supply. You do want to make sure you have a power supply that's applying enough voltage to your Zero. So get one of those. You'll also have a HDMI to a mini HDMI. The Raspberry Pi Zero doesn't have a full HDMI port on it like the 2 and 3 do. So you have to convert it up to use on another device. Also, this is a mini or a micro USB to a full-size USB dongle, which again I didn't use, but it doesn't hurt to have. And some GPIO headers you can solder on. Once again, you may choose to do it that way. I chose not to, but it was just a simple kit to get it. I mean, the Raspberry Pi Zero will cost you $5. The W will probably cost you around $10 if you can get it at a good place. You could spend sometimes more, up to $20, depending on how badly you want to get one, or if you can wait a little bit to get one. So here you can see the little Zero. I did put it in a case because this was, again, well before I started doing these builds. This was probably a good 7-8 months ago. And I was just at that time just going to use my Raspberry Pi Zero as a little arcade machine. So I just stuck in this little bitty case here with the micro SD card and fired it up. Now the Zero does not really require a heat sink. I mean, you can put one on if you want, but the 2 and 3 generate a lot more heat than the Zero does. So I only got the single core in there. And you can see here I'm running some Atari Lynx games here, Gates of Zendikon, one of my first games. I got into Lynx back in the 90s, and I actually had purchased the Lynx 1 on launch day. So this is probably the first game I played on it. And you can see I have the Zero here, and I did use the micro to USB dongle, so I can put a hub on here, and I threw a small little USB Wi-Fi adapter. And this adapter here again converts your mini HDMI to a full HDMI to put on the TV set and just power. So it's a very simple configuration. And I used a keyboard here as well and playing some Pac-Man. So the Zero is very good at running the older stuff. Newer stuff, you know, like a PSX, you know, or Dreamcast, N64. The Zero is really not going to cut that. But I really wanted to play the older stuff, the Donkey Kongs, the Pac-Mans, the old Ataris. And for that, the Raspberry Pi Zero is more than adequate. So I purchased a whole bunch of these Basic Funs. Now these I did not modify. Actually, these are the different case styles that they'd made for the Pac-Man and Space Invaders. I collected all those. And then I bought some additional ones after the fact for modification. But when I saw them when they released it, I knew immediately what this was going to be good for. I knew for a fact I was going to take this and I was going to make my first stab at getting a Raspberry Pi and using RetroPie in one of these machines. So it was from the second I saw it in release day, I knew that's what I was going to do. So I definitely took one Pac-Man, just picked one at random. I had a bunch of them that I was going to use to convert. You can see they use a static screen here, and I put a link down below to my reviews of these Basic Fun original units with the LCD screens, I mean, for $9, they're fine if you want to have a little fun with them. They're not too bad. And same with the Space Invaders. Now, I personally like the Space Invaders a little bit more than I liked the Pac-Man, only because Space Invaders was a black and white game to begin with, where Pac-Man was a color game. Now, the sound effects on both of them, I sent in a review, are spot on. Great sound effects. And the controls actually work pretty well, too. The controls are not bad. It's just that the static screens in this day and age are not spectacular, so it is what it is. For the amount of money, I think it's still well worth picking up for $9. I would not pass this up for that amount of money. So now I'm going to go through some of the parts list of things we're going to need. Now I'm going to tell you what you're going to need, but I'm not going to tell you who to buy it from. I'm not making any profit from this. I'm just doing this to help the community out and share my experiences. But I'm not going to point you to a specific vendor to purchase this from. You'll have the information. You can purchase from whoever you like. I'm not pushing anyone's product or on anyone's payroll to do this. But this is a 2.8 inch what they call an SPI screen, which is a serial interface. It's not connecting to the HDMI port. It's not connecting to the composite port. It's actually going to use the GPIO header pins and send the video over that. Now, the plus side is they're small and they're cheap. I mean, I paid $5 for this screen. I actually purchased some 2.4 inch screens too. I wasn't sure at the time which one was going to fit. And if you don't want to do any cutting at all, you might want to go with the 2.4 inch. That'll go in. Then you have to make some type of bezel around to cover the sides. The 2.8 inch will fit in the screen perfectly with a little cutting on the top and the bottom. But the minus side is this screen's going to need modifications. And we're going to get into that because this is the way I went through it. Now again, these screens look great. It actually looks, I would say, quality-wise equal to an HDMI display. The downside is, since it's not going over HDMI and it's not going over the composite output, this actually bypasses the GPU, the graphics processor in the Pi. And so there is a performance hit. So an emulator that really uses the GPU for its emulation or display is going to lag. Not necessarily that it's going to lag to the point where it's unplayable, but some games will run better than others, and some emulators will run better than others. But I definitely did not find HDMI screen in this form factor. And I probably could find a composite screen that would fit in there, but the resolution I thought might be a little bit off. But for this build, I went with the SPI, and I think overall it turned out very, very well. So when you go onto like eBay or wherever you want to go, just do a search for what you see right here, a 240 by 320 2.8 inch SPI TFT LCD panel. And it's got to be a serial panel board. And that basically means is everything you see here, I'll go into more about this so you know which one to pick up. But when you look at it, there's some parts on here. I'm explaining to you why you need this. Now, I know there are some people now making some boards to make it buy just this screen and not require all this, but I haven't gotten one yet, so I can't tell you whether it's going to work better or worse. But for right now, this is what you're going to get. And it's going to run off of 5 volts. And here's all your basic components you're going to need. You're going to need your Raspberry Pi Zero. You're going to need your screen at least. You're going to need some way to power it. And initially, I was going to use one of these little power packs, but I actually went against that in the long run for a number of reasons. Now, these screens actually do have a touch screen on it, and technically, yeah, you could keep that on there, and actually it is still on there, but I did not wire it up. You can put it on there, maybe use the touch screen to pick your games. I'm not going to go through that in this tutorial. Maybe in the future I will, but not right now. And if you get a Pi Zero, again, you may not need to put a mini USB hub in there because you already have the wireless and the Bluetooth, and you may only need to put a keyboard on once in a while, so you wouldn't need this whole hub. But since I had this already, I needed to put a hub on there, and I had these sitting around, so I'm going to use this here as well. Now, again, you could use one of these power packs. You know, makes it a little bit easier. You can power your Pi from here. It's got a built-in charging circuit, and you can run it for a while. Just for me, I wanted to have a little more flexibility in how I could turn it on, how I could turn it off. Use different size batteries. But there's nothing wrong with going down this road. And actually, I almost did this. Just at the very last minute, I went against it, just in my particular builds. I actually went with the Adafruit. Now, originally, I purchased the Adafruit 500C, figuring that would be more than adequate. And I found that when you're playing the unit and plugging it in, there's not enough oomph to power the Pi, the display, and everything else, and charge the battery. It would actually drain the battery, and the machine would just shut off. So those were like around $12. So these here are a little bit more money at about $20. But the Adafruit 1000C seems to be more than adequate now to run your Pi, run wireless, run your display, run a keyboard, run a mouse, and still charge your battery. So you can do a search. You can actually go to Adafruit's website directly, and you probably pay the same amount of money. But at the time, they didn't have it in stock, so I actually went on eBay and I bought a couple extras. And again, it's going to supply 5 volts, and actually you can also, I believe, get 3 volts off if you needed to. But you can charge your battery, you can run your Pi, you can do an on-off switch. There's a lot of things you can do with this. So I would recommend, if you were doing it, like I did, to get one of these. They're not too expensive, and it'll help you down the road, I think. And then the next thing is to get a battery. Again, you can pick any battery you want, whatever's going to fit inside your particular unit. I had put in 2700 milliamp batteries. They were very similar to these guys right here. But just check the dimensions. As long as you can fit it in your build, put it in. Again, between the Basic Fun units and other ones I did, I just purchased a bunch of batteries in bulk, and I used what I had, and I made it fit in there. And I got lucky. So far, I've gotten everything to fit. Was it easy? No. But I was able to get it in. And just, pick a battery. The Pi Zero, the display, doesn't use a lot of power. The 2700 milliamp battery I have in there runs easily 4.5 hours, which I think is fine. And you can just plug it in and still charge it while you're playing it. So I was totally fine with that. And next must, you're going to need a soldering iron. I'm not going to tell you which soldering iron to pick up, but you are going to need soldering skills. So if you are not a semi-good at it, you might want to look on YouTube for some soldering tutorials to figure out how to do that. But you're absolutely going to need a good flux. And this flux pen is kind of a lifesaver. I mean, there's a thicker flux I used at other times, but this is a non-cleanable flux, meaning that you just put it on, solder, you don't need to clean it off, it won't damage anything. And it's surprising when you go from solder to solder versus solder to flux to solder, how much better that flux makes that joint. So I would definitely tell you right now, if you're going to be doing this, you want to have a good flux, and you want to use it on every single solder joint that you do. And of course, the Pi 2 and 3 have audio that you can tap in and pump out, no problem. The Zero, it's not as easy. If you're using HDMI, you get sound over HDMI. But I needed to do a different route. So I got this little USB audio devices. No drivers are needed. You need to just put a small line in. I'll go into my next video about that. This is about building the hardware. My next video will be about the software needed to make this work. But these little guys are not expensive, like $1.25, and they sound great. And actually, I think they even sound better than the sound you would get out of a 2 or 3 anyway. So it's almost worth even getting these to put on those, because I think the sound is better. And I got these cheap, I think they're $1 a piece, 802.11n Wi-Fi's. Again, if you get a Pi Zero W, you won't need this. You will still, however, need a sound card. And again, you can see on eBay, just do a USB 2.0 sound, and you'll get all these different here. They're not expensive at all. I bought a bunch of them, and they sound really, really well. They even work on Windows. If your sound card's busted in Windows, you can throw it in that. They're worth having. They are not expensive. But again, a lot of this stuff does come from China, so you may get stuff in a week, 2 weeks. Some stuff I waited for screens almost 2 months at times. So you might want to order extra just to have them in case you have another project down the road, because ordering 1 or 2 for a project, or you may break something. I mean, when you get to some of the things we're going to do here, it is possible to break a display or something, so you might want to have more than one just in case something bad does happen. The last thing we needed here was, regardless of using any of the Pis, this little audio amp. It's called a PAM. Now they have different kinds. They have a PAM where it's just pretty much this part here, and you can adjust the volume within the Retro Pi. There's an audio option, but you have to go in there, set it, and then it's fixed. I got this one with a potentiometer built in, so I set the Pi high, and then I can use the potentiometer here to adjust the audio in real time. The minus side to this, I guess, is you have to make another hole externally to get to this, to make the adjustments. If you don't want to do that, just get the regular PAM. But again, you can see these were not expensive. This was actually a little expensive. You get these as little as $1. I think I bought 4 of these. I don't know what's your quantity of one. I bought 4 for this price. But they usually get about 99 cents a piece and maybe free shipping. So again, here's what you want to look for. Just a PAM 84032 channel amp. Now I only used one channel out. I had a mono speaker. This does support stereo. So I simply took the left and right audio channels and pumped them into left and pushed it out that way. I didn't really see the need to play Donkey Kong in stereo because it's not going to play in stereo anyway. All right, so the next thing I added, again, because I didn't have a Pi W, 0W, these little Wi-Fi dongles. You can see they're cheap. I bought like 10 of these, and they're worth having. They're not great. Their range is not great. Their transmitting speed is not great. But again, for what it is, for what I needed it for, it's more than adequate. I'm not transferring huge movie files over. I am transferring over a lot of ROMs, so it did take some time, and it's better to put it closer to your access point because it did drop a couple of times. But if you have something else you want to use, or if you want to use an Ethernet dongle, go that route. Or if you want to use a USB, a thumb drive to move your ROMs over, that's fine too. But I ended up getting these very cheap. I got a ton of them from China, and they work for me. Now, this was a little more fun. When I build these, I want to be able to still access the micro SD card. I don't have to keep opening it up. Now, you don't have to do this. You can. It's not hard to open it up, and you can simply, if you need to take your SD card out and make a change, you can do it that way. But I wanted to be able to simply go to the back, pop my SD card in, pop my SD card out, and be done with it. So I got this here. It's a little micro SD card extender. And I will say that the cable length is way long for what I needed it to be. I couldn't find them any short. I think this was 60 millimeters, I think, like that. It's way, way, way more. And you'll see in the video, I had to really fold it to make it fit. It wasn't a pain, but it was annoying. I'll say that. But I wanted to put it in there. It's not necessary. This is just something I wanted to add to my build. Now, again, powering it, I wanted to be put the power jack convenient for me. So I actually bought a bunch of phone charging cables, ended up cutting off one end of it, and I attached it to this. It's just basically a micro SD card female connector that I was able to put anywhere I wanted to, and I ran these to my Adafruit, which then went into the unit. So again, this is optional again, but for my build, I wanted to have these. And these are always good for lots of things. They come in different lengths. It's just a small switch. I actually use this on the back of my units as the shutdown button. Again, not necessary, totally optional, because you can still shut down your Pi from within the RetroPie menu. But again, 99 cents, I got 50 of these, so why not? And if they're too long, you can always cut them down to size, so I got these as well. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is the actual case. We need to get inside here, get everything out, and, well, begin the conversion. Now, the good thing is that the Pac-Man and the Space Invaders from Basic Fun are pretty much identical on the inside. Now, Space Invaders is only a two-way left and right control with the joystick, and Pac-Man is four-way, but fortunately, they use the same exact parts. So even though Space Invaders only uses left and right, all four directions are there on the joystick. So it doesn't matter which one you use. You want to convert one or both. Either way, the directions are going to be the same as far as this goes. First thing we're going to do is go to the back, and it's really easy to get inside. You can pull this tab out for the battery. Take the batteries out here, and 1, 2, 3, 4 screws are going to be removed. Once that happens, the case comes off real easy. And look, you get a spare set of batteries. So you can use them in something else. But very easy to take apart and get inside. Room is limited, but it's workable. So you can see inside here, the basic layout. This was the little tab here that put it to demo mode versus full mode. The reset button here, we're actually going to use this section as well. The battery compartment, so we have to unsolder these guys here. Take out this screw, remove this little guy right here. And then everything else is right here, and it's really easy to get inside and work on. Again, room is limited, but it's easy to work on this device. We're going to be taking these two screws out and reusing the speaker. This will come right out with these two screws. Then take out this screw here, this screw here. The sound on-off button will come out easy. Then 1, 2, 3, 4. The joystick section, 5, I'm sorry, there's 5 buttons here. The joystick button will come out here. And then you take out 1, 2, 3, 4. This whole assembly will come out. Now these here hold the boards together to the white thing, the white bezel. But it's really just these 4 screws. When you take all those out, that's it. Everything will come out really nice and easy. You can see here. Now what I find is interesting, I have so many of these Pac-Man and Space Invaders. Here's the actual glass for the fixed LCD. Some came with the plastic front cover, others didn't. I don't know if it was a supply issue, if it was a quality issue. Doesn't really matter, you don't really need it, and once we're done, it wouldn't fit anyway. But I just found it was funny that some had this and some did not. But you can see when you take all the screws out, all this will come out here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Take out the joysticks here. These other screws are holding in the joystick assembly. We'll get to that later. But all this will come out. And once it is out, you can see we're not going to be using this, unfortunately. But it would technically still work. So if you found some other way to hook controls up to it and a speaker, put it in something else. Maybe build a little Lego holder for it, whatever you want. But the joystick we're going to use, and what's nice is the next picture you'll see, all these are even marked. If you can read Chinese, it's marked on the back, but English is marked on the front, which made working with this pretty easy. And I'm going to be honest, the pads here are pretty responsive. You know, they're not Nintendo quality as far as, you know, joystick response, but they're not bad for a $9 toy. Everything here is very usable. The speaker is going to sound a little bit tinny because it's not a very high quality speaker. But again, whenever I do my builds, number one, I always try and use or reuse as much of the original as possible. And two, I try to buy, if I can avoid it, anything new. If I can find an old computer with a switch or a wire or a capacitor, I'd rather do that and get it working versus going out and buying new things, if I can. Obviously with the Pi Zero and those supplies, I didn't have a choice. But whenever I can, I try and reuse as much as I can to keep the cost down. And here's a nice blurry picture again of everything here. The screen, the two joystick assemblies, speaker, and the switch. Now you can see on the back, they're marked in Chinese. You can't really read it here. And you have a good magnet, the screw gets stuck over here. But again, once you desolder all of these here, this board still works. So if you want to supply, you know, 3 volts to this and put some other type of joystick on it, it'll work still. It's just not going to work for what you want it for. Now here's the case with everything removed. And you don't have to, at this point, take this out. I ended up doing it just to see how things came out. But these buttons will fall right out. All these buttons will fall right out. And the joystick assembly will come right out with 1, 2, 3, 4 screws. This will pop right out as well. Now they did put like a little rubber straw in here to seal it against. You could take that out. It's not going to be needed. And there's not too much modifications, but we do have to do a little modification to make the screen fit in here. Basically, it's not too hard. I used a rotary zip tool and a file. And basically, you're going to cut here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, make it a little bit easier to see here. So basically, you're going to take this out. And I simply use a rotary zip to cut here and a file to the top one. So there's a lip here, another lip here. So I basically just cut it to the top lip and filed it smooth. And went down to the bottom lip and smooth. So I left this one alone. I cut this one out. Now, when you put the 2.8-inch screen, when it does fit in here, it's going to fit nice and perfect at the top. The bottom there is a little bit of a gap. You'll see it a little bit later. So maybe you don't want to file it down as much as I did. But again, I don't have a problem with it. And the other thing I had to file down was this guy had to be filed smooth to the level of this lip. This had to be filed to this lip. This had to be filed to this lip. And this guy as well. Because the screens would come up all the way up here. Also, this is going to have to be filed off. This has to be filed off. And in addition to them being filed off, I used like a grinding tool. This is pretty, I don't say super thick, but it's thick enough where I had to have it to get the screen in here. And you'll see a little bit more later when I get to the actual screen as to what I'm talking about. But you can't put the screen in as it is. It's not going to fit this way, and it's going to come down to the joystick area and not fit. So we'll get to that when we get to installing the display. You can see that the Space Invaders and the Pac-Man disassemble and are identical inside, aside from the color and the decals. And you know, they really did a nice job with both. But I think the Space Invaders one just looks really, really cool with all this art. I think they did a really nice job with the artwork here. It just looks really, really nice. I love it. But the Pac-Man looks good too. I mean, it's okay, but I definitely prefer that. Just my personal preference. You may have your own, but that's mine. So you can see all the parts are removed. And again, when I cut this down, see it's black here and black here. The Space Invaders is not. It's blue. So it's a little less noticeable when you cut this down to basically this line right here and this line up here. See straight across here. Zoom in a little bit more so you can kind of see. You're going to make it almost flush with that lip. And we'll do the same thing with the Pac-Man. The Pac-Man, I didn't do it, but I might go back and put a black magic marker. And you'll see where and why a little bit later just to make it look more like it was stock. But you're going to have to basically get this section out right here, and the same with up top. Again, when you do the top one here, the screen is like right there. It's perfect. Now, when it comes to here, there's a little bit more of a spacing. You'll see it a little bit later, but again, it's not horrible by any means. So here's just a close-up shot again of where we're going to be doing our work. And again, a shot from the back with everything removed. We're going to be cutting this section out right here. And I just, another shot. I don't know why I took this one, but I just basically took out this one little rubber seal. Took that out of the way. And I took out the door here. Only because it was, when I was doing the cutting and the filing, I didn't want to take a chance of getting this control panel nicked. So you just take out these screws here, and that pops right out. These hold in a little bit, but it will come out. It's not going to be hard to get out by any means. So here's again a close-up shot. We are going to cut right down here. And again, you might want to go halfway on this one if you can get it perfectly level. I didn't trust myself with making that perfectly level. I knew if I went down to here, it would be. So I went all the way down. But again, you may be better at it than me. You may want to only come down halfway, just to make sure that the screen metal part is not being seen. You can't really tell too much, but I definitely could tell, and I think you will too. But the average person going, whoa, will never notice it. And then up here, you definitely want to go all the way to the top. So you're going to cut this straight and go all the way across to the top. This has to be flush with this. This has to be flush, and this has to be flush, and this has to be flush. These all have to be cut out. Remove, remove. I'm going to file that down as well. So you can see here, I did cut them out, and you can see here, it comes up all the way to the top here and all the way down to the bottom here. I'm going to zoom in. It's not the clearest picture, but you can see it was up here and it came across. So I cut it all the way down to here. Now I would probably recommend, and I'm probably going to go back and do it, get a marker or something and make this black. That would make it less noticeable by far, but that's easy enough to fix later on. And again, up here you really don't notice it, but you can hit it with a little black magic marker like a Sharpie to take care of that. But that's the majority of the outside modifications you need to do. Now, I may build a couple more and add more buttons to it, because right now you only got coin, start, A and B buttons on the side. I may, on the back of the unit, put some buttons back there for other games. But again, my point here was to make these as stock as possible and play the real game versus playing, Street Fighter 2 on it, which probably wouldn't play too well on it anyway. But it's an option. You can do it. So here's a better shot of it here. Again, everything's cut out. And, of course, every time I nicked it here just for a second with my rotary tool. It wasn't even on. So I'm going to have to come back here with a little black Sharpie, and I'll fix that up. But every time you get something in there that you don't want to do. But other than that, it came out fine. But you can see, again, how far down I went and keep that nice and level. Again, if you're really good at making it level, I would recommend maybe only going down to see where this line goes across here and leaving that. Again, this is a prototype, so it's the first time doing it. But if you can get it straight, you might want to go like that way, and the screen will look perfect in there. This one just looks a little bit extended, but again, not bad. Up here, though, you definitely want to go to the top, like so. And another angle. I like taking pictures in case you guys didn't notice. But I want to make sure you guys can get an idea of what I'm really doing here. And here it is from the back side. You can see I've done some modifications. I'll try and show you this as best I can when I zoom in. But when we go in here, again, you can see I was still filing a little bit. You want to try and make that as smooth as possible so it's not noticeable. Again, maybe hit it with a Sharpie. And then on this part here, you definitely need to go to this part to make it fit and make it smooth. Now, the way, when you look at the plastic, there's actually a lip here. So there's actually a small gap there. You could probably fill it with Bondo or something like that. It's not that big a deal. I mean, it was probably be more trouble, I think, than it's worth to do something like that. But you can see here, these were cut, again, with the rotary zip. I just went straight across and then filed them down a little bit to make them smooth so the screen can lay across. And this one also has to be cut out. And you can see these were all the way up top. I cut them off. And I know it's really hard to see, but I used a almost like a barrel bit and steamroll cut across a couple of times to make this thinner. I know it's really hard to see, but this has actually been gouged out a little bit to make the screen fit. It would probably it really wouldn't fit. I mean, when I show you, it would be hitting against this plastic. You can maybe make it come down this way more, but now you're interfering with the joystick. So it's just easier, I found, to just cut that out. And that's really it for the most part for modifications. There's going to be something over here for the soundboard I'll show you in a little bit. But other than that, that's really the modifications you're going to have to do to make everything fit. Again, just another angle. Trying to show you the cuts here, all the way here. You can see there's a lip. So there's a little gap here, a little gap here, here, and here. But again, average person is never going to notice that. You and I will, because obviously you're looking at this video. This is something you want to do. So if you find some way, maybe even an epoxy putty, putting it there, but then you got to paint it. Just leave it as it is. Here you can probably see it a little bit better. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit more. You can kind of see here where I was gouged. And don't do it too much. Do it a little bit and check it. You do want it to sit tight to kind of hold the screen there. If it's too loose, it's just a way for the screen to not have something to attach to. I mean, I'll use hot glue anyway, and I did to keep it in there, but tight would be better. And less trimming you need to do. But you are going to have to do a little bit here to make it fit. There's no way around it. Unless you use the 2.4-inch screen. But again, what I was going to show you before is the 2.8-inch will go perfect here when you do these cuts. Here, all perfect. The 2.4-inch will fit in a pre-cut unit, but now you can have a big gap, I would say about here, 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 here. So you're losing real estate, and everything's going to be even smaller. So I would still recommend doing this than versus going to the 2.4-inch screen, but your choice. Again, just trying to show you how that comes down here and how it was cut out as best I can. I'm still using my cell phone camera for most of my work, and this is a free channel. I don't charge people, don't do Patreon or anything like that for it. So whatever tools I have in hand, a cell phone is all I had for the camera here. So I'm sorry it comes out so blurry, but I think you can kind of see here that it is cut out, and it doesn't have to be perfectly level. That doesn't matter. As long as you can get the display to fit in there without bulging the top of your console, you'll be fine. Okay, the next thing we're going to tackle is the actual display. Now again, this is what's called an SPI. It's a serial display that's going to communicate over the GPIO header pins on the Pi. Now, when all said and done, as far as the Pi is concerned, it's an HDMI connection. And actually, you could still use the external HDMI port if your display can support the same resolution this does, which most probably are not going to be able to do so. But with that being said, the Pi thinks it's an HDMI display, but apparently, from what I understand, again, it's what I've been reading, that the display, when it goes over the GPIO pins, does not use the GPU. So if an emulator is very GPU intensive, it's going to be hindered by this type of display. And I have seen certain games like I Love Asteroids, and it hasn't run great on this. Where other games like Missile Command, Centipede, Pac-Man, Donkey Kong run great. Now what's funny is the main version of Donkey Kong runs great on this display, but the NES port of Donkey Kong does not. It slows up quite a bit. But again, it depends on the emulator. How much the emulator relies on the GPU, how much it does not. It's hit and miss, but let me tell you something right now. There will be hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of games that'll run fine with this display. And on this little device, that's fine. You're not playing Street Fighter 3, you're not playing PS2 on this type of system. You're going to be playing Frogger, you're going to play Donkey Kong, you're going to play Pac-Man, Dig Dug, and they run really great on this display. But even though we have this, and this again is a 2.8-inch display from here to here, which is what we want, but this particular board, as you can see, it comes out well past that. So we need to make some modifications. I could not find, at least when I started this build, and this build's been going on a good 6 months at least, before I've been able to make this video. I've seen some people now taking just the display and this ribbon cable and making a very small board that goes in the back. And I'm trying to get a hold of some of those, because that would really simplify a lot of this. This is probably one of the bigger modification pieces of the device, and you have the potential of ruining this, because we need to basically cut this off and cut right to the rim here to make this fit. And it was a learning experience. I didn't ruin any displays, But I did do something, and I'll explain later what happened to my Space Invaders unit. Again, no one would notice but me. And now that I've shown you guys, you'll notice it. But other than that, just trying to avoid this. I'm trying to save you guys a step of having to go, oh man, why did I do that? But again, here's our display. And here's it on the back. There's a piece of styrofoam here on the pins. It's not static. I don't know why they put that on. That's not a static resistant foam. That was whatever. But this is actually for the SD card slot, and we're not going to be using that either. So it's kind of a waste. Now this one is the 2.4-inch display. This is the one I was going to use first. And again, this one would fit without cutting and modification. The only real problem I had with it was that you have a gap on the side. You have to make some type of a bezel. And maybe you want to do that. Maybe you want to put a little artwork on the side, very small artwork. In which case, use this and you won't have to cut anything. It'll go in no problem. But I wanted a slightly bigger screen, and that's why I went the 2.8-inch. But both are 240 by 320 displays, and as far as how they connect and operate with software, they're identical. So I personally recommend going with the 2.8-inch, but if you have these around or this is all you can get, it'll work. You just have to put something on the side to make it look pretty. Make it look pretty. So this one is the 2.8-inch. You can see there is a touch screen on here. And again, I am not connecting that. I didn't connect it to my Pi. You could. There's definitely GPIO pins enough after all we're doing to still have a touch screen in there. But that was not the point of my build, and I'm not going to be discussing that part of it. But we do have to make some modifications to this screen. You can see here in this one, I used a rotary zip tool, and I literally cut it carefully right across all of these little guys here. And you can see I got literally cut a little bit of it off. Again, you want to get as close as you can as possible to it to make it fit. And you can see there's no electronics over here you have to worry about. Here are all your wires coming off the backs of these, which is kind of good. On the other side too, it's on the back. But you have to be careful, because when you do cut this off, if you go too far, it's possible this will pull off the board and you have the potential of ripping these off. Again, can you fix it? Yeah, I have fixed things like in the past, but it's tedious, and just take your time and do it. I say do it right the first time, but sometimes accidents do happen. So just be careful when you're cutting it down. Again, you want to get as close to these pins as possible. And you can see over here, next thing you are going to have to do, and you maybe want to do this part first, I did it after the fact, is you need to have some room to close your unit. So all these pins had to be bent at least, if not a full, about 45, maybe 65 degrees, bend them all out of the way. And you can see the markings all down here. I'll show you more of these later, what these are. But they do have to be bent, and I would probably recommend doing that before you do your cut. But you can see here on the cut that I got pretty close, and actually my Space Invaders one, I got even closer, just to make sure it was room. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight. You want to get as straight as you can. Again, it's going to be butted up against the top of your Pac-Man or Space Invaders console. And take care of all these little circuits here. But again, all the wires come up this way. Cut that down as best you can. And again, on this side too, we're going to be doing the same thing. You can see it doesn't have to be perfectly straight. You can do it, as best you can. But they are going to have to be lopped off. Now, I'm going to see if I have another picture around here somewhere. Before I go to that, here's again 2.8-inch. And you can see these are for the touch screen panel up here. So we're not going to be using these at all. So you can just ignore them, cut them off whatever you want. From here, from the SDO or MISO, sorry, from here down to VCC, these are all going to be used. These are not. So MISO down to VCC, these are the ones we care about. We don't care anything with touch. Again, just another shot. Again, I love taking pictures. And here it is unmodified, but this is what I want to show you on this side. So again, when you're cutting this off, you do have to take some care, because these pins, you don't want to break them off. Now on this side, again, when I did the Space Invaders, it didn't come into question at all. When I did the Pac-Man, it didn't come into question at all. When I did the Space Invaders, there's a gap here, as you can see. And I guess when I cut this off with the Pac-Man, maybe I did it at a different angle. But when I cut the Space Invaders, some of the dust actually got in here and kind of sparkled up under here a little bit. Now again, when the machine's on and you're playing it, you don't notice it at all. And if anything, in Space Invaders, they had a planet down here, so it's fine. But when it's on, you can't see it. But when it's off, you can see some speckles in here, and it's just bugging the heck out of me. So I'd recommend just putting a piece of tape over this area when you're cutting it, and then that would alleviate that problem. So my oof is your salvation. Again, you're going to have to come right to this lip, this metal lip, and you have to cut it right down here. And again, put some tape over here just to block any small particles from this board getting it under here. And again, when you're doing this, wear eye protection and a mask. You don't want these little particles getting in your lungs or anything like that. So just take care with that. So you can see a little bit more here. So here's the cut, and you see there's this gap right here. And this was the one for my Space Invaders. And some of these little particles got in here. And I tried blowing them out. I even tried removing. You can see there's little metal clamps. I actually took the whole screen apart trying to get them out. It wasn't able to get it out. But again, when it's on, you really can't see it anyway. But when it's off, you don't have a perfectly clear screen. You could see little starlets in there. Again, they're prototypes. You learn, and then the next time you don't make the mistakes. That's why we're all here. We're all learning together, and I'm sharing my experiences with you. And another angle here of the cut, and you can see you put a little bit of flux on these pins, and I drop a solder, and then I test my wires in order. We'll get into that in a second. But you're going to solder all these wires onto right over here. And that's basically what it's going to look like. Now again, I fixed these a little bit better after the fact. Initially it was just connect them to test it. And actually over here, I actually have a screen right here. This is actually the 2.4 inch. And it was my prototyping board where I can take these and put them on and make sure they work. But soldering is something you need to be good at, or at least halfway decent at, to make this work. If you're not good at soldering, don't practice here. Get an old motherboard, practice soldering some wires on, and watch some tutorials on that. And here are just some of the little parts you're not going to be needing. Off to the garbage. Do keep your screws. You'll always need them. This stuff, you're not going to need. It's going to be just trash. So here's how we're going to connect it. So like I said, on the Raspberry Pi Zero, you can put the header on there and use like little things like these little guys here. These are from like an old ATX motherboard. The problem comes in, space is very limited in this unit. You don't have a lot of headroom in any way, shape, or form. You need to make things as compact as you can. So I actually soldered directly to the GPIOs. This is pin 1. The square one here is your GPIO 1. Then you go to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, so forth, all the way down. So for the display, you can see right here, these are what the GPIOs are and where I'm connecting them. And I marked it here as best you can. You can pause the video here, take a screenshot, print it out. But you can see 1, just follow 1 all the way down, is going to go to the LED right here. 2, come all the way down, goes to VCC, that's your 5 volts. Pin number 6, you come all the way down to ground. Just follow all these. Now, 16 is the only one that's not here for the display. It's not going anywhere. 16 is this guy right here, and this is the ground. So this will be 16, 15, and 14. And when you look at 14, 14 is actually a ground. And what I did here is I set this up as a shutdown switch. So when you press on the button on the bottom, it's going to shut down your Pi and power it off. Again, this is totally optional. You don't need this at all. You can simply use the program itself, Emulation Station, and you can shut down that way. I wanted a way just if I wanted to hit a button and shut it down quick, that will do it. So that's all that is right here. So that's these two connections right here. And then 17, 19, 22, 24, and 23 are all the ones you're going to wire up. So again, 16 here is completely optional. You don't need it at all. I just added it for a shutdown button. But just follow all these lines to the proper spots and solder them up. Now, the length of wire I used was probably 8 inches. I probably could have got away with 6 inches. And I probably would do that for next time. Again, because it's just more wires to cram in, make fit. But when you're first working on prototyping, sometimes you need more room to work. So probably a 6-inch IDE cable, and that's all you really need. If you have some old IDE cables lying around for a hard drive or floppy drive, they work great. You can need an X-Acto knife to cut them up to make them on there, but you can just pull the ends off with your fingernail and expose the wire, put a little solder on it, and put it down. But again, just follow this diagram right here, and you will have no problems getting your screen to work. Now, when you do power it on the first time, the Raspberry Pi is powering your display, but it doesn't know about it yet. So you just get a bright white screen. That's okay. Don't panic. That means it's getting power, and that's good. The screen will not display anything until we get to the next video when we start doing the software for this build. So that we'll cover that in the next video. So you can see here's the wire. It's just an ID cable. This is like about 8 inches. I would probably recommend using just 6 inches. And what I do on all of them, you can see it here a little bit. I take a black marker to mark pin 1. So I have black marker all on this side, just so I know when I'm working from the diagram, this is my first wire, now it's my second next to that, third next to that, fourth, so I can follow it down the line. Because when you use an ID cable, they're not generally marked in any way, shape, or form. Now you can buy wires, again, you can buy them that are already color-coded, but again, that's an expense. This way, you have an old cable lying around, use that. So here is the Pi Zero on an anti-static bag, and again, when you work with this type of stuff, get a wrist strap, an anti-static wrist strap, and try and, it's not uncommon for static electricity to damage anything or damage something on these units. The Pis are pretty robust. They've gotten better, but still, why take a chance? I mean, it's only $5, but then you got to wait to get another one. Just try and touch something metal before you even get to working on this. But what I did here as well is, on all the ones I was going to use, I looked at my diagram back here, and I put flux on these spots, and I put solder on all those spots, so I knew in advance where my wires were going to be going. And then I simply took my thumbnail and peeled off a little piece, put a little flux on it, inserted it, heated up the solder that was already there, and pushed the wire in, and presto, I was done. So that's all I did right here. I took my wires, followed my diagram, heated up the solder that was already there, pushed the wire in, and let it cool, and all these are now done. So this is just for the display. This does not include my on-off button yet, or the joystick, which I'm using other ones on here. But you can see helping hands does help. You can get these again from China, very cheap. Here's one I got right here. I think I paid $6 for this with shipping. And you got some helping fingers here. It's got a magnifying lens with a light on it. Light doesn't work right now. But these are very handy. In fact, I have 2 or 3 of them. Sometimes you need more than the 2 helping hands. But you can see it holds it nice and steady, so you can use your hands to use your soldering iron. And be careful. It's very easy to be working on a wire that you would put in, and if you're not paying attention, with your soldering iron, nail it and melt the wire. Now, is it horrible? No, because the copper is going to be okay. But you're going to have to cover that exposed copper if you do, let's say, expose a wire here or expose a wire here. You can use anything from liquid electrical tape or something, but try to do your best not to hit it and not have to worry about it. Again, another angle. You see all the GPIO pins that were hit on here. And when you use your helping hands, try and use spots that were already set for mounting. Try not to hit any of these little guys right here and damage them. So now it's time for the display. Now I had soldered, it's your preference, but I soldered onto here first, and I followed my diagram for the display to know which one of these again to put in. And this is where you have to be more careful with that soldering iron, because some of these wires for display are in between these guys. So just be careful, put your flux down, put a little fresh little bead of solder in all the holes you're going to need, and then be very careful. Make sure you follow that diagram and make sure you put in the right wires in the right spot. Can you damage something? Maybe. There was one time where I was actually trying to do it from memory, which is dumb, but I was working on my Pac-Man, Space Invaders one, because the Pac-Man is the one I'd done first. And I followed the diagram in my mind, wrong, and it was completely miswired. Fortunately, it did not blow anything up. These, again, are pretty robust. But if you follow the diagram each and every time that I put out there on my tutorial here, it'll be fine. So just put your solder down and install your display. And there we go. So that part's all done. Next thing I'm going to do now is do a test of the display. So you can see initially we're supplying power. I still have the external HDMI connected, and it is playing on my monitor. But all I'm getting here is a bright white screen. And that basically means that your power is getting to the unit, and that's good. And that's all you're going to get. So it's a good sign. It means that you have got connections going to it. Doesn't mean they're all right yet, but it does give you a good sign. So seeing this at this point is actually okay. My next tutorial, there'll be some software you got to install, and once that's done, you'll start getting a display on it like this. And that's what you want to see. Now again, this was one, I'm doing the video in a different order for how you're building it. Now how I was getting parts in to test. So this was actually obviously before any cuts were done to the display when I tried this one out. And you can see I do have a display. It's upside down, but I didn't care. Also, when you're working on this, we're going to be rotating the display because we're going from the horizontal to a vertical standpoint, or horizontal or vertical, however you want to do it, standpoint in the unit. So right now I don't care. I just got a display. It looks great. That's all I care about. And you can see you got a little Mario running around, different generations of him, some Sonic, and emulation station is loading up, and we have games. So my joystick's not even hooked up yet, but I now have a working display, which is what we really want at this point. And you can see it's very crisp. I mean, it's very small, it's 2.8 inches, but you can make out all the words on here. If this was composite, you would not be able to read these for sure, and probably not this one. These guys you would, but these other ones, or the 2600 label here, it would be too fuzzy. So that's why I wanted to go with this display, knowing I'm sacrificing some speed by not getting the GPIO or the GPU running through the GPIOs. But I'm pretty happy with that display. I think it's pretty sharp. Is it the sharpest and the brightest? No. But this display, new, cost me $5. So for what it's worth, I think it looks great. And that's it. So this part of the tutorial is pretty much done. The next thing we're going to be hitting is the controls. But you can see, again, here's, I think this was the NES football? I can't remember. This was done a while ago. But again, everything's extremely readable on here. So I'm pretty happy with that. You're not going to get that with a composite display. And I still have the protector on here, which is even reducing the brightness and reducing the resolution because it's going through that plastic layer. So I'm pretty happy with it. And you can see here, this is before they were cut, and you can see it's just not going to fit. This is going to interfere. You can see here's the top, the up on the joystick is going to be already hitting this, so that's not going to work. This has to be cut off. You can see it's got to be removed. Here, we already knew these had to be taken out, but this part here would be impacting here long before it went flush, which is why we had to cut that off as well. But the see, here's a 2.4 inch. You can see there's going to be a gap here. It's not much of a gap, but it's definitely noticeable, and it's also probably a little bit more on the other side. So the 2.8 inch will butt up against this nicely. With a 2.4 inch, you're going to have gaps. But again, this was the first display I had gotten. I thought it might work out better, and I just determined that I'd rather cut the display and make it fit larger than have it fit easier and have less of a display area. Just my personal choice. So you can see now, once everything is cut, this is my first test fitting in the Pac-Man. And you can kind of see up here a little bit more. So let me zoom in a little bit. You can see down here, it's getting out of the way of the joystick, and actually it butts up against these two tabs really nice. It kind of holds it from going down. It won't push down into anything. There's a couple of beads of hot glue, and you see I went to the 2.8 inch here. A couple of beads of hot glue to hold it down in place. And even with the soldering, just to protect the wires, I threw some hot glue on here as well, so this can be pulled without putting any tension on here. But to be honest, when you put flux on these, they should be okay. These wires are such a thin gauge, you don't want to take a chance of them bending too many times. They're going to snap off, and you don't want that. So again, here's my wires. They're all bent out of the way, because if they were still going up, was a potential of them being hit up here when you try and close the case. So just get them out of the way. Touch screen not used, but you can kind of see here a little bit. You can see the discoloration of how I had to basically cut up on top of the plastic and make a little bit of a bevel in here to get this to push down. And I didn't do it so much where it was loose. I kept it so the screen actually pressed in a little bit, but I didn't want the top bulging. It's just enough where it's pressing without bulging that top layer a little bit, and it fits in real nice, and the display won't move. I mean, once you put some glue on the two sides, it's not going to shift in any way, shape, or form. It's locked in, which is what you want with a handheld to be moving around a lot. And again, just another angle, trying to get a better camera shot of all up in here on the display. And here it is fired up. So this is a later shot for the next part where I have the controls already hooked up. You can see there's more wires over here. But this is the beautiful thing, and what I was talking about earlier. When you cut to that top spot on the top of the game, see, it's just a tiny bit of black here, which is completely acceptable on the display. Now these side ones, you can see there's more. You can fill that in. I didn't think it was that big a deal. But you can see when you cut smooth that top, it's okay. When you go to the bottom one, you can see there's a larger gap. Now I'm going to paint this black here, and it probably won't be as noticeable. But if you can go halfway, it might be better. It might be give you more of a similar look as up here. And see the sides are fine too. Both sides, you have to be very careful when you're aligning it. You're going to have to take kind of look on both sides to get a spot and get some hot glue back there to hold it in place for the left and right. But the top and bottom, you really don't have movement. It's going to go where it's going to go. So maybe if you cut a little bit less out of here, maybe if you only went maybe to here across, might be better. Again, it's not horrible. These are my prototypes. It was the first time doing it. But if you want it to be perfect, you're going to have to spend some time in filing a little bit at a time to get it to where you want it to be. And again, same, you can fill these in, but to me, it turned out to be not too big a deal. And again, that one little spot, damn it, get that one little spot in there. What are you going to do? So we're just booting up again, and see, we got some games. So Donkey Kong Arcade played really, really nice. And again, you can see the quality of display, the numbers, everything here looks great. The resolution looks really, really good. It played really well. So we need to get some controls in here so we can actually start playing some games. But you can go into that RetroPie station again. And you have options for your Bluetooth. If you have a W, those will be available. The one I had here, I had to put a dongle in for them. But all the information is in here, and all very readable. And again, it looks blurry here, but this is my camera. If you're looking at this first person, it is sharp. So much better than composite, completely readable, where on composite, that's so blurry, even for me, Mr. Eagle-Eye, it'd be very hard to see. And you can see I loaded one of the themes. I think this was called Pixel. And the Pixel just makes some of the text a little bit larger to see. But it's all very, very usable. You can see here, they're all very, very readable. And again, it's a little more sharper in person than it is through this camera that I have on my cell phone. And he's playing some Berserk again. Everything goes very, very well. The blurriness is not from the display. That's as crisp as can be. That's coming from my cell phone. And again, you can see here, if you paint this black, it probably won't be too as much noticeable, but you could probably cut it a little bit less. But if you left it where it was, if you left it here, you can see it's about where his hand is. You're going to be missing, some of the screen on some of these games. So I'd rather have had it down further than covering some of the text. Now, again, in Emulation Station, I know there are ways where you can adjust the screen to make them smaller or bigger, but I'd rather use as much real estate as I can. Again, personal preference. You can leave this alone, leave the top one alone, and just shrink the screen down in resolution, but that's not what I wanted to do. And good old Crazy Climber, one of my favorites, and actually I have another build, actually. That's this one right here. I just actually finished it. I'm able to play Crazy Climber. I got 2 joysticks built in over here, and I also have a trackball in there for playing Missile Command. This is my Crazy Climber, Missile Command, Robotron, Centipede game console. And this is not a Coleco case. This is actually an Excalibur Stewie pinball. I just finished, actually yesterday it was finished. This took me about 2 months between getting parts and having time to actually work on it. But that's not what this video is about. It's about this guy right here. But I love Crazy Climber, and that's why I built that other one. And you can see here, again, this will be more in the next shots. But the display is in here. Your control panel will fit now. You can put this all back in place, and you're going to fit all your controls now. We have to fit all the different parts now in here. And that's the hardest part, figuring out where you want everything to go. Because once you put it in and start gluing stuff, it's a pain to take it out if you make a mistake. Or if you keep moving things too much, you're going to break these wires. They're not the strongest things in the world, so you have to take your time and really think. And that, out of all this, that takes the most time. At least it did for me. The soldering, the building of the parts maybe took 1 day. Just get all the parts done. Probably not even a day, probably half a day. The hard part was thinking how I want things to go. Where do I want to get the access to the SD card? Where am I going to put the power switch? How am I going to mount everything in here and make room for the battery and everything else? That's what takes the time. So I'm hoping this tutorial helps other people out and saves you a lot of the time that I spend trying to figure that part out. But you can see whether it be the Space Invaders or the Pac-Man, they're identical. So it doesn't matter which one you have. The actual build of this is going to be exactly the same. So technically, if you don't mind opening it to you know, charge it or run a cable in, you can be done. You can just seal this up, run a power jack out the back in the battery compartment, and be done. Just shove everything in here right now, and you'd be done. Of course, once the controls are done, that's the next part. But technically, you could be done at this point. I did a little bit more, which we'll discuss a little bit later. So again, you can see them running now with the controls, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But you can see this is actually running. I actually got the Coleco VFD games. I have a tutorial. If you want to check on my channel, I have a tutorial on how to make the Coleco VFD games actually work on these units, which is kind of neat. So you're actually running a better screen to go back to those ancient static screens. But you can see they look really, really nice. I mean, they're two nice builds, and I was originally planning to make more for the community, but it actually took a lot more time than I thought. If I can get a 3D printer and learn 3D printing a little bit, I could probably make a back panel and make them that way. But that's why I'm releasing this video now, so you guys can make your own. It's just too time consuming for me, but it's really neat not to offer it to other people to go make their own. And on that note, we're going to end part 1 of the conversion of a Basic Fun Pac-Man and Space Invaders into a Raspberry Pi running emulation station. I hope you enjoyed the first part, and again, this video has been very, very delayed, probably a good 4 or 5 months. Just time, family, work, things get in the way, and I do apologize, but it is a free channel, and I kind of do this in my spare time for fun. And I hope the first part at least gives you an inkling of what's involved to get this converted. It's really not difficult. It's really just time consuming, mostly in the trimming parts and getting everything to fit. But it is fun if you have some time and you have a couple of these units sitting around. It really is a really neat conversion. I think they look really great, and they're a lot of fun to play. So again, stay tuned to my channel. Please like, share, and subscribe to make sure you don't miss any videos, because parts 2, 3, and 4 will be up soon. Thanks for watching, and remember, game on. Sit, Blue Blue, sit. Good dog.